We're coming now into the events of Holy Week. Palm Sunday in Mark chapter 11 marks the beginning of the final week of Jesus' life before his death and resurrection. So this 1 week now in the life of Jesus, 1 week in his 3-year-long ministry, is less than 1% of his ministry time in total, and yet it takes up a vast amount of space in all 4 gospel accounts. Something like a quarter of Matthew, a third of Mark, a quarter of Luke, and about half of John all deal with the events of this particular final week. Which means that this week is the absolute focus, the centerpiece, the point and purpose of the entire story of the Bible. Everything that came before this was leading up to this week. Everything that comes after this is reflecting upon the consequences of this week. So this week in Jesus' life is different. It is set apart. It is not like the others. You might say it's a holy week. The most important week in the history of the universe. And it all starts here with the triumphal entry. Now, it's worth knowing that as Jesus enters Jerusalem, he's not the only one entering Jerusalem. Thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of people are doing the same. Josephus, the ancient historian, says that the population of Jerusalem would swell to around 2 million people during the Passover festival. So this is a really big deal, the Passover in Jerusalem. Now, like many big occasions, the manner in which you arrive to the occasion says an awful lot about you. Or at least it says a lot about how you think of yourself, doesn't it? So think of prom night, for example, where the spectacle of arriving at the event is often bigger than the event itself. It says something. If you just walk to the prom night and skip the faff of trying to arrange a grand entrance, it reveals something about your character. It says something, of course, if you turn up in a limousine. It says something if you turn up in a tour bus or a tank or a helicopter. That kind of a dramatic arrival tells people how they ought to think of you. Warren Wiersbe, the Bible commentator, makes a wonderful point about this entry. He says that if Jesus, the King of all creation, turned up on a war horse, we might be in awe of him here, but we'd never feel like we could approach him. He turns up, though, on a donkey. You can approach a donkey. You can outwalk a donkey. You could stroll up and pat the donkey on the head. Even his entrance to the Passover festival shows how wonderfully approachable Jesus is to all people. He's not boxed off in a chariot. He's not sat on top of a war horse with a sword in his hand. He rides upon a donkey. Why? Well, of course, to fulfill ancient prophecy. But then the question becomes, why did God make that the ancient prophecy? And the answer to that question has got to be that God chose this manner to display not just who the Messiah is, but what the Messiah is like. Listen again to that prophecy from the book of Zechariah. We read, "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, but lowly, and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." If we carry on reading, Zechariah says, "I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will bring peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." We're used to seeing battles won and lost by armies on horses and chariots, but this king is different. He doesn't need those things. He rides into the capital city on a donkey, without an army, on his way to win the greatest victory mankind has ever seen. Isn't it fascinating to see how Jesus fulfills and subverts these prophecies and expectations? People expect him to ride in and overthrow the Romans and establish the kingdom of Israel. Instead, he rides in, yes, but he overthrows the power of sin and establishes the kingdom of heaven. You see how what he is doing is so much bigger than what they would expect. He is changing not just people's lives, but their eternities. The true king comes now, and he comes not to take life, but to give his own. Not to spill blood, but to shed his own. Not to slay, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now that, of course, is an infinitely greater mission. But for many people, that is not the king nor the Messiah that they want. And so this crowd becomes something of a cautionary tale of what not to do. They'll praise him with their lips, but not with their lives. They'll cheer for him for a while they think he's come to give them what they want, but they will turn on him when it turns out that his plan looks very different to theirs. Maybe today you're thinking, if Jesus will ride into my life and solve all my problems, then by all means, I'll follow him. If he will overthrow my enemies and give me prosperity, then yeah, he might just be my kind of a Messiah. Well, you'll be disappointed to know the truth then, but it is the greatest news in the world. His ways are higher, his love is greater, his plans are better than that. He comes not to bring short-term success, but eternal salvation. But if you see yourself clearly, you will know that is the very thing you need. If he came to kill his enemies, we'd be dead. Instead, he comes to love his enemies and die in their place for their pardon. This is the King of love. This is the Prince of Peace.